Good morning. This is Jo from Avalon by Nature, and welcome to another Avalon's Cuppa Chats. And today with me I have Glenys Livingstone. Welcome, Glenys.
Thank you, Jo. Thank you, Jo.
That's all right. You're welcome. Glenys and I have just been having a quick catch-up chat because I guess we passed in the corridors many years ago at university, and we've just sort of straightened out how that actually, or what those timelines were for each other. But it's really nice to have you come and have a chat with me from your home now, and I'm just really excited to hear more about the book that you wrote, I guess many years ago, Pagaian Cosmology, and also the CDs that you produced, seasonal celebration CDs. And I know these have been around for a while, Glenys, and I'm only just sort of come across them myself. And thank you for, supplying me with those to have those available to our customers here at Avalon by Nature. But, this isn't about talking about products. This is about talking about process and creativity and living. And I'm just really keen to hear more, I guess, about your process or how you came about to be writing and presenting workshops and all that sort of stuff. So it's a big question, but, start wherever you like and let's go from there.
All right. Well, I guess it begins with a hunger for what we call goddess.
Yes.
A hunger for female metaphor.
Yes.
Being so tired of hearing of male experience expressed in male metaphor. I was a theological student. I was passionately a theological student.
Mm.
So I was a Christian hippie, back in the 70s.
Oh, wow.
And so I was on the path,
Yeah.
And but at some point, I guess I went to Berkeley. I did go to Berkeley, California.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, and that was where I met my Waterloo, as they say.
Uh-huh.
Waterloo, the point of crash.
Right.
I was saying,
right.
Wait a minute. Why is all this, in terms of a male god and all about the boys and realizing that even everyday language, people always spoke about creatures, he, him, his, and they still do. Well,
Mm.
And even if it's a hen, it's a he, his, and a him. Sometimes, a hen or a cow, they're having sex. But but the chronic use and the chronic erasure, the invisible. There's just been a book published called Invisible Women, but about women still missing from data. But
Yes.
So we're talking about the 70s at the moment, for my experience. And realizing, the wake-up calls, like, I'm not there, or it's always about the hero's journey, not about, the hero's journey.
Yes.
And so, yes, that was suddenly, and I read Mary Daly's book, Beyond God the Father. And that was the undoing. That was it. Finished, over.
All done. That's it. What now? What now?
I tell people I'm not a Christian any longer. Oh no, but you are really. Blah 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 blah. So they really couldn't handle it,
Yeah.
The exit from that world, which many have done since, and
yes.
many had probably done before.
Right.
But so that was, and then it was Starhawk.
Yes.
Starhawk was around, and that was the beginning of the rebuilding. Her spiral dance and her writings. I was actually part of her first class in 1980 in San Francisco.
Oh wow! Wow.
We didn't realize that. I didn't realize that was. But about 13 years later, when we were talking, that I had been part of that first class in 1980 in San Francisco.
Wow.
And so that was the rebuilding. And at that point, it included the goddess and the god.
Right.
And that was okay. But my focus really wanted to be on goddess, as a metaphor for the entire thing.
Right.
And it was hard for me to articulate what I meant by that. You know, that it was always like, oh, but you know, he must be included, or well, and realizing that, well, he is included. The goddess includes everybody. She gives birth to all, including him. He's the child. So by the time I wrote my master's thesis, which was a theological, it was a master's in systematic theology and philosophy from the Jesuit School of Theology in Berkeley.
Wow.
Yeah, so people say, oh, you studied with Starhawk and the Jesuits? Yes, I did. So
my brain just exploded. Yeah.
And that's part of, you know, the ceremonies that I created was a combination of study that I had done with the Jesuits in terms of creating liturgy.
Mm-hmm.
And they were a radical mob, mind you.
How do you mean they're a radical mob? Just really quickly.
That mob in Berkeley,
right.
they had their fingers attacked by Rome and they had some of them in silence. The guy that taught me liturgy was silenced for 2 years for using using cheese bread for communion or something like that. He was, you know, his theology was, you know, but that was an interesting experience too, because the man who taught me in the theological circles, I realized at some point that it wasn't good enough. So they would change their language and they would do circles, and they do all that they could within that framework, within the Christian framework.
Yeah.
And at some point I realized that it wasn't good enough for me. You know, that even the best they could serve up was not what I wanted. Right. I was out of there, over the fence.
into the next paddock.
Into the wild, open space. And that's what I say, you know, the whole thing about Mary, for instance, Mary, they tried to define her and keep her like a little bubble at the bottom of a fish tank, you know. They tried to contain her, but she kept breaking out.
She did, and she still does.
She kept rising to the open air where she belongs, you know.
Yes.
And that's it. You know, you can't put a copyright on the open air. And so that's what it was like. I'm out of here, jumping the fence. And Starhawk did help me rebuild, you know, that, and remains important. Her rituals and the way she frames them in the spiral dance form the basis of rituals and ceremonies I do. And she's coming to Australia as keynote speaker at a conference at the end of April. And I'm going just to see her.
Oh, how exciting.
Yeah, it's a permaculture convergence, you know.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, and
cool.
She's keynote speaker. So she's been very important in the rebuilding.
Cool. And so you were in California and you started your rebuilding. How did you come back home or come back to Australia?
Oh, and the other important person was Charlene Spretnak.
Oh, yes.
I met Charlene in Berkeley in 1980. I went to her place because I'd been advised by another woman, Claire Fisher, her name was, to go and talk to Charlene. And Charlene had just written Lost Goddesses of Early Greece, a tiny book, but like germinal, as they say, ovarian.
Yes. Ovarian, yes.
Yeah. They say that, don't they? Yes.
I totally, I hear that all the time. Yeah,
that's another conversation. But, yes, Charlene, ovarian, or germinal, if you want germinal.
Yeah.
Yes. So Charlene, in her Lost Goddesses of Early Greece, her restoring, particularly of the story of Demeter and Persephone, and formed the basis of my workshops. And it was the first story I told the women, the way Charlene told that, and it took me years to still understand it or to really get it myself, but the idea that Persephone descended to the underworld of her own volition.
Right.
It wasn't an abduction, a rape, and I learned it in my school reader. The school reader about Persephone being whipped off to the underworld by Hades, and he never took the rap for it. We never realized that, Hades should have taken the rap for that, and we still don't, of course. Domestic violence is still a huge issue, and we don't realize that we apologize for the poor men who, must be good character, fine. So no.
Loving
So
father, wonderful husband, pillar of the community.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll stop you.
Yeah, that's another conversation. Yeah,
I can see a series coming along, Glenys.
Yes. So, yes. So, yeah, and every woman still grows, and there are still grand productions by goddess women who still tell that story that, she was abducted. But Hades doesn't take the rap for it. Somehow she falls in love with him eventually, or whatever. But in any case, that wasn't good enough. So, but Charlene tells it differently, that it was something that Persephone did of her own volition. And it was based on research of the mother-daughter mysteries, the Eleusinian mysteries, that went before it, the Thesmophoria that went before the Eleusinian mysteries, and they were mother-daughter mysteries in ancient Greece.
Right.
And it took me, by just retelling that story, and then Carolyn McVicar Edwards published a book, The Storyteller's Goddess, and her version of Persephone's voluntary descent, to gather, and she comes back with stones, precious stones,
right.
So the purpose of Persephone's journey and her desire to go to the underworld was to comfort the dead, and for the gaining of wisdom.
Yeah.
That's a shamanic journey.
Yeah.
To restore that story to women's minds is to restore our integrity.
Oh, that's powerful. I'm getting real tingles. Shivers and tingles.
Shingles.
Not shingles. That's horrible. Wow, that's very powerful.
And it did take me a long, when I first heard Charlene's story about, she went there to comfort the dead, and oh yes, well that's kind of nice.
That's
story,
women's work. We're always doing that.
Yeah. But it took me a long time of telling that story and doing ceremony based on that story, to understand how that restored our integrity, how it restored Persephone's integrity, and how she was actually a shaman. She was redeemer. She was a redeemer, restoring beauty to the world. That was her mission as the seed, and she was a metaphor for the seed that goes into the earth, because she comforts the dead in the sense that she gives hope for beauty to be restored. So the dead, it's a miserable, horrible thing. It's like, to lose a beloved one, or their beloved one's gone, or even your own death. And you're on a great mission, sometimes, but even if you're not. So the hope when someone passes, especially if they're, killed in traumatic circumstance, that beauty will be restored. And people do, they set up foundations, they do all kinds of things in memory of this person. But the fact is that every day in the world, in the garden, and on earth, every day, beauty is restored.
Yes.
It goes in, it looks like crap. It looks like compost. What's compost look like? Compost doesn't look so. Yeah. But it's the place where new life is regenerated.
Yes.
And when the seed goes into the earth, you have to sit and wait for a while.
Yeah.
But when the plant emerges, it's like, oh wow. Or when the branch, this dead-looking branch, is, and I was encouraged myself when I had traumatic circumstances in my life, and I thought, it's over, mate, over.
Yeah.
And the dead-looking branch in the garden gave me hope, because out of this dead-looking branch, you'd see a green shoot emerge.
Yeah.
And that was the magic that Demeter experienced when she's sitting there thinking it's all over, never going to see Persephone again.
Yeah.
She's surrounded by these little shoots that come up. And that's the miracle. Right. Persephone returns.
Yeah.
And she's the redeemer. I've come, I've returned with new wisdom.
Yeah.
And I've comforted the dead, and they are comforted by the fact that I am coming back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the new ones, they're comforted by the new ones who will be born. You know, we have to roll over and make space for the new.
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Leaving behind, I guess, legacy. That's what we've done before, and wisdom and knowledge that we've gained and passed on, and
Passed on. That's what the red, you know, the red thread is about, the passing on.
Yeah.
If it had been cut, then we wouldn't be here.
No, that's right.
You actually can't kill it. Even if mothers and daughters don't speak to each other, the fact is, you can't kill it. It's there.
That's
you might not talk to each other, and that's okay.
Yeah, yeah. But that thread is still there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, so Charlene's story of Demeter and Persephone was really important, and I grew into it.
Well, it's amazing to hear that you, even though you weren't fully cognizant, I suppose, of the story itself, you kept telling it anyway. Did you, you know, did you hope that you would get it, or did you realise that in the retelling and the embodying that it would, or when was your aha moment? It's like, oh my goodness, what is this about? I've got it.
I don't know. Well, you see, I think, yeah, I guess I heard it in 1980, but I mean, I hadn't started teaching. It wasn't until I bit the dust in the early 90s.
Oh.
Well, because I think I thought I knew everything, you know. I did. I thought
it's always a shock when you don't.
When suddenly the world gets, you know, you get dumped.
Cruel. Oh, I've frozen up. Just give me a sec. I'll just check this internet. It does that from time to time. Oh, we've disconnected. Just hold on for a sec. I'm just changing the Wi-Fi. Drives me nuts. Yes, I'm back. You're back. Hello.
Yeah, we must have dropped out, huh?
I think so. My internet, like I check it before I start, and then it just freezes from time to time. So yeah, sorry about that.
It could have been, well, it could have been mine, because sometimes if something happens around here, I'll just check it. Although I have got a hotspot on now, but I'll just check that I'll go on my hotspot.
Yeah, I'm doing the same thing. Because the house Wi-Fi just isn't producing. and unfortunately, this is a third theme that has run through all of these.
So I'm just...
Joe Pete.
What? It's telling me I require a password for my Wi-Fi.
Okay, well, I'm good now, so let me know when you're okay.
I don't know what my password is. I've long forgotten it. Or I'd have to go to the fridge and find it. So we'll just rely. We'll see. We'll just hope that it doesn't drop out again.
Yeah, I think we should be good. So let's
right. Yeah.
Keep going while we're fresh. Yeah.
You'll be able to fix that, will you?
Oh no.
Right.
That's all right. I'll do something. We'll do something.
Yeah.
And look, it's a running theme, so really it doesn't matter. So okay, so you were Charlene, I think it's the story you were you're retelling this story of Demeter and Persephone for a while. Yeah, when did you realize what the story was actually about? Yeah, the aha moment.
Yeah, well, you know, so I already knew the story, kind of telling it, and it wasn't until I started teaching goddess workshops.
Right.
I actually, you know, started, well, you know, I kind of knew the story, but then after trauma hit my life and I was rebuilt, but it was the early 90s, and then I went to women's spirituality class with a woman called Mari Tulip at the Women's Academy in Sydney.
Yes.
And so in a group of women, started to tell stories and explore. I think the book was called Reweaving the Visions that we studied. but that experience formed the basis of my workshops. And then an important part of that workshops, always in the first classes, was the telling of this story, Demeter and Persephone. And really, I had no idea. As many, I've heard other people say, in the beginning, you just know that you've got a passion for something.
Yeah.
And you know that that's the right thing.
Yeah.
And so I'm telling you the story. I had no idea about the depths of the story.
Right.
And I think that's the case. So that was only like 93.
Yeah.
The first goddess workshop was 93, where I began to tell the story to other women. And so it was a long time before I really got it in deeper, and I do think it does take practice. You see, you can't just, I think you do have to practice. It has to be, which is part of what my passion was to create. That's why I use the word religion on the front of my book. Some people really don't like that. It's because the word religion is problematic.
Yes, it says reinventing earth-based goddess religion.
Yes, and some of my friends really questioned my use of that word. And I said, well, the reason I'm using the word religion is because it's a practice.
Yes.
It's required. It's not just an idea.
Or a structure, but a practice.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's where I really learned, was in the ceremonial, which I began doing the ceremonial celebrations in the late 80s here in Australia. It was my first winter solstice. When I got back to Australia from overseas, and I realized I just couldn't celebrate Christmas in the middle of summer.
No.
Because I had experienced Christmas as winter solstice in the Northern Hemisphere.
Yeah.
And so it was winter solstice that I wanted to celebrate when it was winter solstice. And that was really the first ceremony. And it was the beginning of a process. But it wasn't until the late 90s that I actually did them all 8. Right. I decided I had to get religious about this.
Yes, not just cherry pick one or the other, but do the whole lot.
Yeah,
and there's 8 of them.
Yeah, so I was doing the winter solstice. And there was a moon circle group of women I was part of, where I was, we used to do the ceremonies in a very informal way, the seasonal moments. Some of them, but not all of them.
Yeah.
But in my workshops that I was teaching, and I had started teaching them at the continuing education programs at universities, still, the extra programs.
Yeah.
So I would teach a goddess workshop. And then at some point, for some reason, I had to separate out the seasonal ceremonies, and I noticed the power. I had begun to notice the power of the ceremonies.
Right.
Which, it's kind of like noticing the difference when you clean your teeth. It's like, oh, it makes a difference. And it's like doing the ceremony or doing meditation. Saying, for some reason, that made a difference to my...
Every day.
And I noticed the power of the ceremonies. And so that's why by the late 90s, I decided to get religious and write scripts for all 8 of them.
Right.
In preparation for teaching all 8 of them.
Right. So can you just quickly run through the 8 of them? I can think of it on the top of my head. So you've got your winter solstice.
So it's based on the solstices and the equinoxes are the first 4, and they're basic, really.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's amazing how many people don't even know what a solstice is. Mm-hmm. When I say to people, they say Happy Christmas. I say, I'm doing summer solstice. What's a solstice? It's like, this should be basic information. Right. Anyway, so there's 2 solstices, 2 equinoxes.
Yes.
And then there's the cross quarter days.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's begin make it simple. Let's begin at winter solstice. Winter solstice, and then the next cross quarter day is Imbolc, what we call Imbolc. That's early spring. It's in between winter solstice and spring equinox.
Right.
So spring equinox is the 3rd one around. And we're going anti-clockwise because we're doing southern hemisphere here.
Yes. Yeah.
There are northern hemisphere people who say, no, wait a minute, she's gone the wrong way.
Yeah. Was that your best Californian accent, was it?
So anyway, so there we are.
Yep, okay.
Spring equinox.
Yep.
And then Beltane. High spring. You can call these things, you don't have to call them by their old Celtic names. So Beltane or high spring.
Yep.
And it's in between spring equinox and summer solstice. And then the summer solstice, the Celtic name is Litha. So a lot of pagans use the word Litha, but it's summer solstice for the average. And then there's Lunasa, it's commonly called Lunasa. I don't call it Lunasa because that is the wake of Lugh, the sun god. And I prefer to store it as Lammas, Feast of the Bread. And it's the passing of all. Lammas. It's the first celebration of the dark.
Right. So that's your autumn, or almost autumn, is it? Or early autumn?
Yes. It's really, the experience is that it's late summer. That's the experience because it's still really hot.
Yeah.
You know, and it's hotter than it was at summer solstice.
True.
So it's, you know, we're talking about late January, early Feb.
That's right.
And it's hot.
It is.
It does feel like a cauldron, which is perfect.
I'm a Lammas baby.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we use cauldrons. You know, it is when all that grew through the summer passes into and it's the cauldron. It's the soup.
Yep.
Even we must accept even the passing of the sun.
Yes.
Oh no, it's all over. So, so that's Lammas. And then on to autumn equinox, which is where we are now as we talk. Yep. Sort of coming into autumn equinox. And I'm an autumn equinox baby. Oh. Right on the moment.
Ah, wow, cool. Happy birthday soon.
Yes, it will. So autumn equinox, which, you know, in the way I story it, is the descent of Persephone. The beloved one is lost. And for this we grieve and rage. We mostly do it as a grief process in that ceremony, in the autumn equinox ceremony, but there have been times, and I do think it's good to do a rage process as well, include that, especially in these times.
There's lots to rage about.
Yes. So it's a good time.
Wait, I've got to wait till that time. Store it all up.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, well, now let me finish the wheel.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, I do think these things, once the poetry embeds itself in you,
yes,
then you realize, of course, that it's all happening all the time, actually, on a big planet, on this big planet that we live in. Yeah. This poetry of her creativity happens all the time.
Yeah.
But anyway, but it is good if you get practice at celebrating it, you know, so that it can embed itself in you.
Yes. And you're not so displaced too, because I guess finish and I'll do that thought in a minute.
Yes, okay, place. It has to be adopted to place. So, and then, so from autumn equinox, we go to Samhain. Yeah. Which is, you know, the compost. Yeah. The space for dreaming up the new. It's a fertile space.
It is, isn't it?
Beltane, it's a fertile space. It's the fertility of the dark, where Beltane is the fertility of the light. You're coming into relationship with all the other beings. Yeah. Samhain opposite is the fertility of the dark and the sentient soup that we live in, and where all is possible and we can dream up something new. Yeah. Yes. And then back to winter solstice. So that's the wheel, yes. Yeah.
Wow. And I'm reading a book at the moment called The Gift of the Jews, and one of the gifts, I guess, that this book says came about. I don't know what to say, but anyway, one of the gifts that's talked about in this book is the idea that that not only do we live in a cycle, but it's possible to kind of like move that cycle up, not just be going in the same cycle, but to kind of move that cycle up. Does that make sense?
Yes. Well, and the only difference I would say is rather than moving it up, it moves along.
Yeah, so you're right.
And Thomas Berry talks about time developmental consciousness, and that's part of the evolutionary story. It's like, you know, yes, we have moved, dinosaurs on the planet anymore. It's letting me know that my internet connection is unstable.
It did that to me too. So you're all right. Just keep going and we'll push through it.
Yes. So that we don't still, things have, we're not still singular cells.
That's
we
right.
are multicellular organisms. And so evolution, there is the story of the universe, which is another really important part of my cosmology.
Yes.
Is the universe, the story of the universe. It's
yes.
really important in terms of the evolution. So yes, it is a combination of cyclical and time developmental. For sure.
And I think when you talk about your cosmology, the thing that really struck me about that was that you bring sacred and sentience to everything, not, to living beings, but also concepts. And you talk about capitalizing the names of things rather than just having them as, I read the preface too. But capitalizing names gives them an importance and a sentience, I guess. That's a broader kind of probably more accurate concept, isn't it? Talk about why you could you talk about
my thesis
talk about that? Yeah, go on.
Yeah, well, my thesis supervisor is still for her, who I'm still in touch with. That is a real pain, It's sort of like it makes it kind of quaint, to see all these, capitals. Whereas, once you know that everything is sacred, then you don't need to capitalize these things. So it's true. It's a cultural problem, really, to need to capitalize. And I'm trying really hard not to capitalize as much as So, in the articles, when I edit an article for publication or bits of my book, I take the capitals out. So, as much as I can bear.
Is that
for that reason?
For that particular reading?
Well, only because it puts some people off. It puts people off. It's like, and some people don't need it. They really don't need it because for them, they understand the sentience of the cosmos.
Yeah.
It's only it's often only in popular culture that's all been lost.
I see what you mean. Yeah. So, but for popular culture, that's important because it's keeping it front and center that that these things are important. They are sentient. They are part of our larger cosmology. Which, if we don't name it, then we kind of don't regard it, I guess.
Yes. So that words, particular words, and I choose words carefully. It's true. Like in the ceremonial scripts, I choose carefully how I say things. Yeah. Because there's a lot of speech that our language is powerful. And what we speak, and I think some people keep telling the same stories with their language. Well, and I used to even say, simple things like, well, men are this or men are that, or this is, and if you keep saying it, then it's certainly going to be that way forever. If you keep saying it, then it'll be that way. Right. So you have to, so it's been important to me in the ceremonial scripts to speak a new language, to speak what we want to be. Yeah. And my thesis advisor is Susan Murphy. Her name was. She's a Zen Roshi. Susan Murphy. She said it's kind of like we keep practicing it until we know it. We act like we know it until we know it. Yes. And it was a bit like that with the damage of Persephone sword. So in ceremony, you get a sacred space. You get to create a space where you can act like you know it. Yeah. And then eventually you get to know it. Yeah.
And then you don't need to act anymore because you are it.
Hopefully that's the idea. Yes, it embeds itself in. One of the sacred tasks of the great goddess Bridget, she was matron, not a patron, as they say. She was matron. She was a smith, blacksmith, a healer, doctor, and poet. Poetry was important. Wow. So those three qualities, she could forge things, she could make things. Yeah.
Because she's a goddess of fire, isn't she?
Yes.
Bridget, right, you always, whenever you think of her, you think of, well, there's always fire around Bridget. Yeah. But she could harness fire. So when she's a blacksmith, she's harnessing fire to forge something new that's stronger. Yeah.
Yes. And healer. She's a healer, a doctor, a healer, physician.
Right.
Whatever that is.
Yep.
Midwife, but she's a healer.
Yep.
Herbalist, probably. She would know all the herbs.
Yes.
and a poet.
Uh-huh.
Being able to use language.
Yeah.
To carry the culture, carrying the culture.
Yeah.
And also speaking a new one.
Yeah.
So it is kind of like being pregnant with something, with a child, a new being, that you're carrying something that's, you know, ancient, but it's also giving birth to the new. And then you do it through language, poetry. It's a powerful way of doing it, speaking it. So ceremony provides that space.
Yeah.
And actually, even a women's circle, a circle where each one is given the chance to speak without comment.
Yeah.
That's why that's so important. It's an important experience for everyone to have, and for ceremony. And Indigenous people still do it.
Yeah.
And they have continued. They've never forgotten that in circle, there's the opportunity, sacred circle, for each person to speak their truth without comment, argument, trying to fix it. Even if they're screaming and raging or crying, you don't try and fix them. You let them hear themselves.
Yeah.
The great witness. And Jean Houston, her work was very important to me. That was where I think some of my first experiences of that, of being the high witness, what she would call the high witness.
Yeah.
But basically just hearing each other. Oh, Nell Morton is another old feminist. She wrote an article called something about hearing each other into speech.
Yeah.
So the hearing calls forth. And women need to do that for each other in their circle.
Yeah.
Just hear each other into speech.
And even if not in a I suppose you could say circle, even just in small gatherings, you know, if you've got women getting together, you know, just that action of sitting and listening to someone talking about whatever they're going through, and without judgment and without, like you say, fixing, and just going, you know, just hearing it, being heard. Yes. Powerful, isn't it?
You can do it over coffee. That's right. Yes.
That's right. And then that process of going, oh, okay, well, yeah, thanks for that, guys. Ladies, or, you know, girls, thanks for that, girls. I got it now. You know, I never had that space to express it.
I know what to do now.
Yeah. That's it.
Thank you for not telling me what to do. I just worked it out.
Did it for myself. That's right. Oh gosh, I had a mad question a minute ago. Oh, it's gone. It's gone. Oh yeah, this is why this is a chat, not a formal interview.
Right.
They're very organic. Oh, no. What else do you want to talk about? I'll let you take it. Yeah. Actually, I was thinking, because, you know, when we were talking about capitalizing words, I realized that I knew what I was talking about because I was reading it in the book, right? But for those who are watching us, what sorts of words would you capitalize? And when I mean capitalize and you mean capitalize, we're just talking about the first letter, you know, like Joanne has a capital J and Glenys has a capital G. So what are the sorts of terms that we're talking about that need capitalizing in order to imbue that importance or that sentience and power that needed to be brought back or returned? Yeah.
Well, the word that keeps in my mind, keeps coming up, is depth, for instance. D-E-P-T-H, depth. I used to write it with a capital D.
Wow. Why is that?
To reinstate its dignity, because the cultural, certainly the patriarchal, people wouldn't necessarily identify it as patriarchal cosmology, but, you know, the cosmology that we live in and grow up in most around the world almost is all about higher, getting higher, you know, you know, higher is the place to go.
Right.
So to reinstate, you know, but in goddess cosmology, I'm sorry to tell you that it's a descent to sovereignty. You know, it's a descent to wisdom. Wisdom is gained with a descent.
Right.
Not like going up there, you know.
Right.
We are up here, and we get smart when we get dumped in the mud. And that's the beginning of the sovereignty. So the game, it's a descent.
Right.
to wisdom.
So you sometimes we hear that comment, oh, he's hit rock bottom. So it's that descent,
Yes.
and then at the rock bottom, everything is stripped away, and then you start working your way back up again.
That's right. So, and it's an ancient story. Inanna was one of the first. She was the first goddess or female person, human.
Yeah.
So all the, you know, God stories of Jesus and whatnot, you know, they're based on Inanna's descent. Ancient story, which, and her story is based on the moon. So the moon is the original, you know, descent and return within the 3-day thing, you know. Yeah, so I'm not sure, I'm losing my thread, or your thread.
No, I think so the descent is what's important. And
and so reinstate depth.
Yeah.
So capitalizing depth, so that with to sort of try and reinstate some integrity or significance to the word. That it's depth. The depth is important. Like I use depth, the depth of this moment, like this moment. The depth of this moment and what it has taken. This moment. It has an infinite depth.
Yeah.
Oh, it has an infinite depth that goes all the way back to the beginning origins. So that's the word depth. Yeah, so I'd capitalize it to try and this word.
It's a significant word. Yeah, and it's significant. Yeah. Cool. So other words like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, I suppose that brings us to this concept of place. And I noted too that, you know, like, you know, my family, I'm guessing your family, we're not, our cultural origins are not of this country, this place. And yet we're enacting a religion or a cosmology, I suppose, or a religion that is born elsewhere and constantly transplanted, using your terms, you know. So how and then of course when we're talking about not inverting but placing the wheel of the year in the seasons that we're experiencing now, and perhaps even adding seasons or conflating seasons because of what's actually happening in the physical material world that we're living in, how important is that?
Yes, it's very important, and they're huge questions.
I know, we've got 5 minutes.
Yes, it's very important. First of all, the recognition that we are on colonized land.
Yes.
And so I write about that to some extent in the beginning of realizing that, you know, and it's still a gradual awakening process of how bad that takeover has been of this land.
Yeah.
We're some of us are still waking up to how bad that has been.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I do feel like the mothers and the grandmothers of this land have spoken to me in some way beyond my ken. But you know, it's not that I've included much. You know, I see it is my own heritage that I have learned and been able to place, because it was in the Blue Mountains. I was in the Blue Mountains, and the seasons were all part of that, very much part of the place.
And the seasons are very marked there too, aren't they?
Yes.
It's quite distinct. Yeah, so
it worked in that place, and it wouldn't work. And my students from around the globe, or wherever they are, I've always encouraged them to, you know, they have to make it particular to their place.
Yeah.
It's a cosmology that has to be adapted big time to you personally, because your stories and your metaphors, you know, will be different.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you say, oh, well, there is the solstices and there is the equinoxes, and this is offered poetry, but it may not work. This offered poetry may not work in your place, and you will have to work at how it works for your place.
Yeah.
And for you.
Yeah.
And I think the indigenous people of any land don't want the newcomers just, you know, stealing their stuff.
Yes.
So I come with my stories, And I think that's appreciated. Oh, you've got your stories. Oh, let's hear your stories. And you can hear my story.
Yeah.
Let's share stories.
Yeah.
And this is the stories of the place where I came from, or how I've developed it in the place, on this land, in the Blue Mountains.
Yeah.
And so there's an openness to sharing and saying, oh, you don't want to steal my stories. You have got these stories. Let's talk.
I see. Yeah.
And there are Indigenous peoples of this land who recognize the work of Maria Jimbudas. You know, Maria Jimbudas, when her work in the language of the goddess and all the uncovering of goddess culture that she did, when some elder Indigenous women saw the images or heard, they got it straight away. You know, it's like, oh, yeah, it was like they recognized the language of the goddess.
Yeah,
they
had their own stories and their own names. Yeah,
their
absolutely.
Own images, you know?
Absolutely.
And the cave paintings and all of that, which they were really familiar with. You know, a lot of them, they knew those paintings. You know, the average Western white person is not familiar with those images, but you know, the average Indigenous elder woman knew it right away.
Yeah,
no problem.
Yeah. Wow.
So the language of the goddess is an ancient language, and it's
universal.
And they don't always call it goddess. You know, some cultures don't have that word. They don't need that word. They understand grandmother spirits.
Yeah.
Yeah. Grandmother spirits. Oh yeah, grandma. You know, right.
Wow. Yeah.
And the Kali Kaggle, who has been doing all kinds of her own pilgrimages around the place, she speaks of visiting the grandmothers. So when she goes to visit museums, art galleries, caves, the ancient figurines, she says she's visiting the grandmothers. The
universe's grandmothers, all of our grandmothers. Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Oh,
yes.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, wow. It's been wonderful. Thank you. It's been a real, well, for me, it's been a real stretch of my memory of a lot of the authors and the people I've read, but you've actually met. So thank you for that. Sorry. And wow, I thank you so much for sharing your time and having a chat with me. And is there anything that you want to leave with, or the last words at all? You're stuck now too. Okay. Oh. Well, I think then, in that case, we might finish up here now. Our internet both.
Hello.
I know, it just stopped off again. So I was just going to just close it off, and then it just completely disappeared altogether. So
right.
I think we'll call it a morning, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I've really, really enjoyed chatting with you. Thank you. Thank you, Jo. It was great. Thank you. You're welcome. All right. See you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.